coaches. Blow the whistle, ay. Blow the whistle, ay. Blow the whistle, they can't hold a flame against you, ay. Blow the whistle, blow the whistle, ay. Blow the whistle, got the game, it ain't no issue, yeah. Blowing the whistle, I had enough with you, the championship, it is gone. Ain't listen to you, I can't give it to you, cause you don't know what I've been on. This is the Coaches Podcast.
What is going on, everybody? Welcome into the Fantasy Coaches Podcast. I'm your host, as always, guys, Coach Steve. We have another fantastic episode for you guys today. We are talking week 13 now, guys. The season's almost over. Very sad, but we got to give you guys some more fantasy advice, especially with waivers. Waivers don't really do much this week for us, me personally, but we will have some other things to talk about, of course, and we'll get into it. So we're going to start off with some news. We're going to get into some scheduling, and then we'll get into some waivers at the end of the show. So if you don't want to listen to all that and you just want to hear about waivers, skip ahead like 30 minutes and we'll give you some waiver wire advice. So let me introduce the crew as always. Coach Jib, brother, what's going on?
Go Birds.
Yes, the Birds had a fantastic win the other night. So love that. It was a great game. Sure you felt that way too.
Mm-hmm. Oh my God. Speechless still.
Speechless. I love it. And of course, Coach John, what's going on, bro?
Nothing much, everybody. Just still trying to keep my lunch down from watching the Patriots yesterday. I'm glad someone on this panel is, two of these guys have fun teams to watch. But say la vie.
Yeah, it's definitely a little more fun on our end, unfortunately, John. But it's okay. It's okay. So you had your reign of fun. So now it's our turn. So let's get into some fantasy news here, guys. So injury wise, there's a couple things going on from week 12. Dorian Thompson-Robinson, the rookie quarterback from the Cleveland Browns, concussion. More than likely, there's a potential of him missing. Obviously, this week would probably put PJ Walker or maybe Joe Flacco in the driver's seat. Baker Mayfield was getting his ankle x-rayed or MRI today. He got banged up a little bit on Sunday, but then he came back and played basically much the whole game. Amari Cooper, late fourth quarter, had a rib injury. He did not come back in for the rest of that game. The game was kind of pretty much over into the fourth quarter. DeMar Douglas, another head injury. Definitely not great to see that. He was basically the only reliable source in terms of pass catcher for this Patriots offense. Rashad Rashid, thigh injury. Supposedly he missed out on having it to be a major injury, which is great news. Obviously, with Chris Olave having a concussion, which probably puts his week 13 status in jeopardy. So good to have Rashad Rashid hopefully maybe playing in this week. So definitely some different big names there. Is there anything you guys want to mention here, or are you guys ready to move on?
No, I mean, early in the week, tough to kind of tell, but yeah, these are all kind of stinks. It stinks to lose guys probably post, trade deadline in most leagues. So it is what it is.
Especially with what'd you say?
Oh, go ahead. I was gonna say a shame that Olave got that concussion because it was like the first time in a long time that him and Derek Carr were on the same damn page. So
he had like 150 yards in the first half. It was great.
Looking awesome.
Yeah, definitely. And of course, this is the big bye week, guys. This is the week 13 mega bye week here. We got like the Bills, the Giants. Of course, I can't think of any of the teams at this moment. The Ravens are on the bye. Bears, Vikings. Yep. So there's a lot of teams, maybe not as many fantasy assets, but some important assets. So we're going to obviously give you waiver wire pickups to help out for the week. Before we get into that, we talked a couple of weeks ago about how a good fantasy stretch for scheduling and how to get there and some favorable matchups that hopefully you've taken advantage of and have propped your way into potentially making the playoffs in a few weeks. But since trade deadlines are basically ending for most teams this week, maybe dynasty leagues are extended, but a lot of redraft ones are over probably by Wednesday. I think ESPN is the 29th. We figured let's talk about some, playoff matchups here that you could go out there, whether it's trading, picking up, and kind of talking to that. So let's get into that here first. So this is obviously if you're in your playoffs between week 15, 16, and 17. We're going to go about each position. I'm going to ask the guys a couple questions here and there, and we'll get that done in the next 20 minutes here. So quarterbacks, the best matchup for quarterbacks, we have the Giants, the Panthers, the Titans, the Cowboys, and the Saints. again, for the most part, outside of the Cowboys, it's a really bad situation. Obviously, Tommy DeVito, Bryce Young, a lot of those situations are not great. And especially those right outside the top 5, you have the Vikings and you have the Browns. So in reality, it's really not that great in terms of the situation. I don't know, really, nothing really stands out here. I don't know how you guys feel about this. I mean, do you buy into any of these guys, or is it really just no, I don't want to, especially for the best?
I think in 2 quarterback leagues, you could buy in pretty cheap to Derek Carr, and you could buy in pretty cheap to Josh Dobbs. I think both of them, and Josh Dobbs, we've been saying it all year, has a little bit of a rushing floor to him, so he's fun. Minnesota has a good schedule, and he might be getting Justin Jefferson back, so that's someone that I definitely would be interested in. Single quarterback, probably not. You probably have someone better already on your roster. But in 2 quarterback format, for sure, I'm totally cool with trying to get Josh Dobbs for the push.
Anything there, Jibs?
Nah, not much. Those are lackluster names of quarterbacks. Like, I know some ESPNs run a little bit longer, depending on your league manager. But if you still could get Dak Prescott, he's been scorching hot lately. That's definitely a good asset
I
to
like to
have.
get him.
But yeah, Derek Carr's he's good, but like he just kind of lets you down every now and then too. So it's gonna be a lot of inconsistency with those guys. But I'm kind of shameful of some of these names on the worst side if you want to get into them.
Yeah, no, definitely. Like I said, Derek Carr's got the Giants and Bucks, which are great matchups, obviously, for the playoffs. I think you guys kind of said it back best. I mean, Dak, amazing. Definitely try to buy low on Derek Carr and Joshua Dobbs. Outside of that, it's no one that really can be trusted. A lot of rookie quarterbacks, obviously. Hard to trust any of those guys consistently. On the worst side, we have, and this is pretty big, the Miami Dolphins, the Cincinnati Bengals, the Washington Commanders, Houston Texans, Jacksonville Jaguars. Just outside of that, we have the Steelers and the Ravens. So let's talk about more of the top 5 guys here. Outside of obviously Jake Browning, we're not going to care about Jake Browning, but most of those other quarterbacks have very good fantasy quarterbacks for us this year. Who concerns you the most out of those 4? And I'm talking Tua, Sam Howell, CJ Stroud, and Trevor Lawrence.
I think Trevor Lawrence probably scares me the most. He's been good for the past 2 weeks, but we've seen it go south for him really badly. We've seen him put up 12 points because all the touchdowns go to ETN, or he can't break 200 yards passing. So that's one that, I don't think anyone at this point is really relying on Trevor Lawrence, but that's one that would scare me. And I know it's crazy to say, but CJ Stroud, I mean, there is that rookie element that, like, down the stretch, tough matchup, you could have some bad games. And I know everyone's been relying on CJ Stroud. He seems like a set it and forget it kind of guy right now, but that's one that I would definitely be wary of. If he puts up a dud in your playoff push, that would sting. That would really sting.
Chibs?
Oh no, I'll just highlight Tua. At least the silver lining with Tua is that like 2 of those games, I think weeks 15 and 16 are home games, so Dolphins kind of play well at home. So like I wouldn't be too concerned over that fact. But that week 17 game versus Baltimore is something to definitely put your eye on, because they give up second fewest points to quarterbacks. They have been absolutely rock solid. We saw what they did to Justin Herbert last night, for God's sake. I see Tua doing that and tenfold. So if you do have Tua, you should definitely look to see what you could scrounger up and see how it goes from the stretch forward, because I don't know, like I see him play at the Jets, but like hopefully he could play better in Miami.
Yeah, I mean that does concern me. Obviously, I mean you saw Hill and Waddle have great games, but Tua is still bad day with him. It's the turnovers, but you're right, he does play better at home. I'm okay with CJ Stroud. Looking at his matchups overall, I'm not concerned. He does have the Titans 2 times, so that's decent. Trevor Lawrence, he's got to play Baltimore at some point in that matchup there. Definitely don't love to see that. Sam Howell, he does have the Jets. He's got the Cowboys in the weeks 15 and 16. Definitely not the best matchups. Oh, and San Fran. So, I mean, I feel like you just have to rock with a lot of these guys because, to be honest, Tua has been, I hate to say that about my own Dolphin, but Tua has been the worst. I mean, you look at what he's given us on the floor, he's given us a lot of bad games. I mean, Howell has been pretty good for the most part outside of like 2 games this year. Trevor Lawrence, definitely a big concern, but he's playing hot right now. You know, we don't know how well that's going to continue And then CJ Stroud has been pretty good right now. He hasn't really given us too many downer games this season. So, hey, Albert, what's going on, bro? So you have to wait and see. And you have to, play your cards right. I mean, you could probably sell a lot of these quarterbacks to get like a Pat Mahomes, a Justin Herbert, and go for one of those quarterbacks who obviously you don't see on the worst side of the list, which is great. You might be able to do it with Justin Herbert right now, or even Pat Mahomes. Pat Mahomes not playing great fantasy for us right now. So a lot of good different matchups that you can go out there and maybe make a trades for and get some of these quarterbacks off your team. So running backs now. Running backs are the best playoff matchups here. We have Philly, the Raiders, the Patriots, the Chargers, the Falcons here. And then just outside, you have the Browns and the Chiefs. So who stands out here for you guys?
I think for me, two players that I think you can add if you still have a trade availability, trade deadline still going on. Ramondre Stevenson, I think, is someone who has been relatively disappointing. Nobody wants anything to do with the Patriots right now, and I get that. But we saw how abysmal that team looked yesterday, and Ramondre still can put up points. He could still get 100 yards on the ground, get a score. They're gonna rely heavy on the ground game down the stretch here. They don't have a quarterback, so they're gonna need to. And the other one is Austin Eckler. Austin Eckler has been alarmingly disappointing lately. He just hasn't looked like himself, has some fumbling issues. But I still think that he's a talented running back on a high-powered offense. So given a good matchup, given a great situation, he could easily pop off and have a big day. Those are 2 guys that I'd be interested in, and you could get for, not have to give up the farm. I think after this past week, forget it on Bijan. You're never going to get him again. Same thing with Josh Jacobs, and then DeAndre Swift has been pretty solid all year behind an unbelievable offensive line. So those 3 I feel like are kind of untouchable, and they're probably on championship caliber rosters already. The other 2, you might be able to pry away from that team.
I like your thoughts on that, but I'll definitely take a whack at Isaiah Pacheco as well, because most likely he's been your RB2, RB3, maybe the 3rd running back on your team. Obviously, you're probably driving yourself crazy putting him in and out of your lineup, but this guy's playing with the Chiefs. He has great matchups. I think he has Patriots, Vegas, and
Cincinnati.
Buffalo. Oh, Cincinnati. So those are all easy games that they could just kind of mow over some guys. So I like Isaiah Pacheco as well, included on that list, even though they're just outside.
Yeah, no, I think there's a lot of good running backs here. Outside of maybe in terms of confidence level, I think Ramondre Stevenson has been the one guy who people have not been that confident about. Great to see him have a really good game this week here, especially with the issues at quarterback going on right now. But this top 7 or so, top 5, whatever you want to say, you have a lot of great running backs here that you are expecting to be elite running backs, and you're sitting in good position. So if you have these guys, especially if you're contending teams right now, obviously you have to be pretty happy. I think DeAndre Swift might have the best one. I mean, they have the Giants and the Cardinals in week 16 and 17. I mean, get past Seattle, beautiful. And they allow a ton of touchdowns. I mean, Swift is going to be, I think, helping people win championships. On the other side of things, though, the worst playoff matchups, you have Saquon Barkley with the Giants, Alvin Kamara with the Saints. You have that whole trio at Baltimore, the Bengals with Joe Mixon, Alexander Madison and the Vikings. And then just right outside of that is, the RB4 on the season or whatever he is Brian Robinson, and that mixture of then the Panthers, Miles Sanders and Chuba Hubbard, who, again, I didn't mention this, but Frank Reich got fired today. So definitely could be looking for changes maybe in that offense overall. But
fired the
who
running back,
concerns you?
fired the running back coach as well. Just
Yeah, Deuce
FYI.
Staley, and I think Josh McCown got fired as the
Everybody, they cleaned house, which is
house.
insane. It's insane to me that they did that, but yeah, that's a different conversation.
Yes, the owners are not happy, and the owners messed up originally. So, so of this running back core, guys, who concerns you? You know, who concerns you the most, actually? You know, in terms of elite players.
Well, it's Barkley for me.
Yeah. I mean, Barkley for sure. I think everybody else is, I don't think you were really relying on everybody else to be a superstar. I think Brian Robinson was a nice surprise, but you weren't drafting him super high. You weren't relying on him to be a superstar. But Saquon Barkley, yeah, it's going to be pretty alarming. You drafted him high. You expected a great season. It's been a little tumultuous, and then you're now with Danny DeVito, and so it's just, I don't know. It stinks because I always liked Saquon as a talent, always liked him as the player, but it's getting time where the word elite might need to move on from Saquon Barkley sometimes.
Yeah, and like those 3 opponents he has are pretty stiff run defenses too, and he's basically the conductor of the Giants offense. So I'm going to be very skeptical. He's going to need a lot of volume to make amends.
Yeah. 20 carries for 66 yards and maybe a score. It's like, I hope that happens.
Not great. So let me ask you guys, in terms of trades value, because we didn't really talk too much about trades of quarterbacks, because it's kind of hard to trade quarterbacks. But like with, Saquon Barkley, Alvin Kamara, would you guys send those players away potentially straight up for Ramondre Stevenson, for Isaiah Pacheco? Maybe you can get a little something on top of that. But again, Alvin Kamara's been playing well still. He's been playing well, but Saquon, coming off a bad game. But obviously the matchups for these Ramondre Stevensons and Isaiah Pacheco's are great. Would you trade those guys straight up? Would you trade them for their players plus something a little bit more?
I would be interested in that. I am, I think outside of, Christian McCaffrey and, maybe, I think Christian McCaffrey really is the only one that's matchup proof. Other than that, like, you need to play matchups with running backs. And if you're looking at your week 15, 16, 17, and you can trade a guy who's got a tough matchup, maybe he's got the volume, but Saquon Barkley, perfect example, or Alvin Kamara, but you could go get, Josh Jacobs, you could go get, Ramondre Stevenson plus a little something, or even if you have to, give up a little to, Saquon plus a little extra to go get Austin Eckler or Bijan. Like, I'm interested in that, because I think the worst thing you could do is just think, oh, it's Saquon Barkley, so he's fine. And then you end up, again, getting 20 carries because he is a starting running back, but it's for, 65 yards. And you're like, all right, great. There's, 9 fantasy points doesn't really do anything for you. That's the tough part. It's like you need these guys who can go out there and have 25-point games if you want to win a championship.
I'm definitely okay with Saquon, for instance. Like, he's on a bye week. If you want to give like a blue chip person in your league, hey man, this is Saquon Barkley. Give me your Isaiah Pacheco, man. I'm in a pinch. Like, I just need to get this W. And they'll be like, hey man, Saquon Barkley. Not even thinking it. I think that's a good one. Alvin Kamara, I'm like so on. Like, I know he hasn't been running as well, but like he just seems to catch like freaking 4+ catches a week, so that'll definitely give you a safe floor in PPR, but it's something you should definitely look into, especially if you could get a piece plus, for instance.
Yeah, no, definitely. Like I said, I'm good on trading Saquon if I can right now. I think it's the perfect time to a true contender. If you're trying to make the playoffs, you're still like, I'm just there, and I know that if I can get in the playoffs, I can do some damage. But obviously Saquon's not helping you this week. He's got the Packers, which is a good matchup next week. But again, that playoff matchup sucks. I mean, I'd be looking for Isaiah Pacheco. I'd be looking for Ramondre because, Ramondre. I'd be looking at those guys because they can help you right now. and you might be able to get something on top of that for Ramondre or even Pacheco. I think maybe it's more of a straight up thing with Isaiah Pacheco, just based on what he showed us this past week without a Jarrett McKinnon on the field. If you could sell Gus Edwards, I'm looking to sell him as quick as I can. It might be hard at this point because he's coming off a bad game. So same thing with Joe Mixon, looking to sell him before things go nuts. Brian Robinson, like I said, I mentioned, his value is so hard to break down because we know who Brian Robinson is, but Brian Robinson isn't playing like we think Brian Robinson should play. He's an RB5 on the season, for God's sake. But none of us, I think of Brian Robinson as RB5. We think of him as RB17, solid RB2, nothing big. But so if you could sell on him, I'd be looking to sell on him. He still has a week 14 bye in a terrible playoff matchup, and someone might want to buy into that, especially someone who needs points this week because the running backs are so bad right now. I'd look to sell high as best as possible on Brian Robinson too. So, all right, so let's go to the wide receivers. Top best playoff matchups for wide receivers. We have Seattle, we have the Giants, the Cardinals, the Eagles, the Cowboys, and then just outside, obviously, Denver and Baltimore. So, guys, best matchups. What stands out here for you guys?
Well, I mean, you're probably psyched if you have CeeDee Lamb and Scott. I'll tell you that much. That's going to be fun. I think, it's tough. We talked about it last week with Mark Andrews going down. I think it's kind of hard now that we've seen what Zay Flowers can do. But Zay Flowers would be a great, piece to try and come on towards the end of the season here. Gets those touchdowns. They're going to use him every way possible. Seattle, again, I think that DK Metcalf is just one of those guys who's a big game waiting to happen. So those two players, to me, I think you haven't had much faith in them all season, but could come up big down the stretch here if you need them. I'm not super interested in anyone for the Giants or Arizona, but and then Philly, obviously, you're starting those two superstars. And then Dallas, obviously, you're starting CeeDee Lamb. So I think the Seattle and Baltimore ones, to me, are the ones that are kind of on the borderline there, and I think you're going to be very happy with those pieces. And there's an outside chance that JSN has a late season breakout here as well. So, just knock on the door for whoever has Zay Flowers. I know this week was probably tough because he just had 2 touchdowns, but tell him it was only 28 receiving yards and 1 rushing play. Don't buy into the hype. Buy into the hype. Buy into it. Buy into that. That's impressive what he did last night. So.
Oh man, it's like just a month ago you could have bought low on Devontae Smith for peanuts too.
Yep.
But I wouldn't poo-poo on Marquise Brown. At least the guy got 12 targets. He'll be a target hog going down the stretch. I know Kyler Murray's still getting acclimated, and he probably won't cost you as much as those guys that we just listed. And I guess you probably could trade a bench piece for a guy like Courtland Sutton, someone you could just put in low on your flex, and he'll grab you a touchdown and get you probably 50 yards. So you could take a consideration in those two as well, just to give them some name recognition.
I respect it. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of good things here. I mean, the Seattle matchups are fantastic, but what's going on with Geno? Is he healthy? It definitely scares me a little bit on that. I wouldn't want to buy into Seattle's receiver core, but if I have them, you should feel pretty good that you have them on your team. Obviously, you don't want to touch the Giants. Hollywood Brown maybe is an okay, buy low ad if you can. Obviously, you love having the Eagles. I don't know if maybe Devonta Smith is a sell high, and you can tell him hey, he's got a great playoff matchup. Dallas Goedert is pushing to come back next week. Dallas Goedert never went on IR. I didn't realize. I thought he was went on IR. He never did. With Dallas Goedert on the field, either. Yeah, Dallas Goedert on the field. Devonta Smith doesn't play as well. He is a warrior. So that's interesting. I mean, buying into maybe Brandon Cooks on a really low right now could be good for you. I know he's having good games, but the name value at this point of his career doesn't fit what he had maybe 3 or 4 years ago. So you could still buy that. Jim said it, Courtland Sutton's solid. I'm honestly looking to sell high on Zay Flowers because outside of his 37-yard rushing touchdown, he had 25 yards and a touchdown. So it's a great time going into a bye for a contending team. Hey, Zay Flowers is a great playoff matchups. Go and I'll give you this for this, and then go out and buy him. So So the worst side of things, we have, of course, Miami. Got the worst matchup for wide receivers. The Patriots, the Commanders, the Bears, the Chargers, and just outside the top 5, you have the Falcons and the Browns. So what stands out here for you guys on the worst side of wide receiver playoff matchups?
There's a lot of garbage wide receivers in that mix.
Yeah. It's funny. I don't think much really bothers me. The only thing I will say, what bothers me is Jalen Waddle. Like, that bothers me because he doesn't have a good matchup and he is very, very boomer bust. And so come down this playoff stretch, you could be kind of thinking to yourself, oh, Jalen Waddle, I need a little spark. I need a big play guy. And given a bad matchup, he might not be the move to make. Not worried about Tyreek Hill. It is what it is. You weren't planning on starting anyone from New England. You weren't planning on starting anyone from, Washington. And then Chargers too. I think it's really outside of Keenan Allen, and he's just going to be 14 targets, so it doesn't matter. You play him. It might not be a monster game, but you at least you have to start this guy. Because even look at the Ravens. He had a bad matchup last night, ended up being fine with a fumble. And Chicago, I think what we see with Justin Fields and DJ Moore, that'll be interesting. Down the stretch, given a bad matchup, can he keep that sort of low-end wide receiver 1 status? I think you still have to sort of bet on it that he does, but that could be a lot of decision making for managers, given the situation, given the time.
Well, I guess I'm kind of souring on Terry McLaurin in a way. He will be the Commanders' #1 receiver, and Sam Howell is basically leading the league in passing yards. So they're going to chuck the ball. It's just how efficient is that going to be? So he could definitely let you down in the playoffs, given the fact that he's facing the Rams, the Jets, and then 49ers. So, that's a tough slate. But God bless you, Terry McLaurin owners.
Yeah, definitely. And it's you can't even trade him away to get a different piece right now. Maybe you could trade him away and get Brandon Cooks plus. Maybe. Maybe. I don't know. And again, redraft's easy to do that, maybe, but maybe not. Definitely look at that. I mean,
would you do McLaurin plus a little something to get Cortland Sutton? Would you do something like that?
I would have them pretty much on the same page personally.
Okay.
I wouldn't want to buy into Cortland Sutton that much. Maybe I would. Maybe I would actually.
Okay.
It depends what the plus is. I would consider it. But yeah, I mean, it's okay. Again, really no one else really stands out. I mean, you're not touching New England. You're not touching Atlanta, really. You're not touching the Browns, really. Outside of that, I mean, your big 4 of those teams of Waddle, Hill, Allen, and Moore are the only ones that stand out, but they should have no problem at least putting up good fantasy numbers throughout the playoffs. So, all right. And then last but not least, the tight end position here, which is obviously not that fun because, you just start your best tight ends and call it a day. But for the best, we have, Jib's left. We have the Raiders. We have the Browns. We have the Giants. We have the Titans, we have the Panthers, and then just outside Detroit and Minnesota here. So, John, what stands out for you in the best playoff matchup for tight ends?
I think Hawkinson and Sam Laporta. I mean, it's awesome. You've obviously you were never going to plan on benching them at any point in time, but this gives you full confidence that they could have some ceiling games for you in the playoffs when you need them most. So, it's good to see. That's really good to see. Again, everybody else, Vegas, Cleveland, Giants, Tennessee, forget it. You don't want anybody. I don't care what the matchup is. Those.
What about Darren Waller? Darren Waller still might come back this year. Would trying to buy on Darren Waller right now if you could be interesting?
Maybe. I mean, we don't know. We don't know what he looks like coming back from injury. We don't know what he's going to look like with Tommy DeVito.
DeVito's making everyone look great right now.
Yeah, I mean, made Jalen Hyatt look good. That's true. He did make Jalen Hyatt look good.
After their bye week here, they have a bye now, so he's got 5 weeks of rest.
That is the only one that I would consider. My fear is you would still have to pay up more than I'm willing to pay to take that risk. You know what I'm saying? If someone's willing to part ways with him for relatively cheap, I would. But if it's,
would you trade away Cole Kmet? Would you trade away
Dalton
Schultz to go out and get?
I wouldn't trade away Dalton Schultz. I'd probably trade away Cole Kmet. Okay. I don't know. I like Dalton. Yeah, maybe Dalton Schultz too, but I just get scared.
Those same players for what about David Njoku?
No, I don't.
Njoku's been 8 points over. He's been over 8 points in 5 straight weeks. I mean, he's playing with different quarterbacks every week. This guy.
Yeah, that's the one thing. It's crazy that he keeps performing. I say no because I don't trust the quarterback, but he seems to keep performing no matter who's chucking the ball up to him. So, I mean, maybe you can, and I think that the sentiment around Njoku is exactly that nobody really wants him. So you could probably trade for him for pretty cheap. If you had like an Evan Ingram, you could go get Njoku, just do an even flop there, and I guess I would do something like that. Sure, yeah.
I mean, obviously the top 2 guys are not in the top 5, but I mean Waller and David Njoku could be good buys right now. On the worst side of things, we have the Texans with Dalton Schultz. We have that Cincinnati mess there. The Tyler Conklin and the Jets. I don't know why the Giants are on this both. I messed up somewhere there. Giants should not be on both lists. But the Jaguars and then off Chicago and the Rams. So, does Evan Ingram make you nervous? He's been, not great the last 3 weeks here now. And it looks like he's getting kind of worked out a little bit, but I mean, he had 7 points this week, but tough matchups coming down the stretch,
Yep. Evan Ingram is the one that definitely raises red flags for me. He's obviously gotten much less targeted ever since, say, Jones came back into the lineup. And what's crazy is the offense is moving the ball well, and Trevor Lawrence looks good, and Evan Ingram's not a beneficiary of that at all. So, yeah, I think Evan Ingram for sure is someone that I would try and trade away. If you could flip him for Njoku, like I just said, I would do that. If you could flip him or if he's a throw-in piece in a bigger deal, I'd be okay with that too. So I'm cool with that. Everybody else, I don't think you're really relying on many other of these tight ends. Dalton Schultz was a nice sort of surprise mid-season ad. But I at this point, I would hope if you're a champion, I always try and put my head in the mindset of a championship roster. If you're a championship caliber roster and you're really putting up points, you're probably not relying on that list of tight ends. You probably already have someone better. But maybe not. And if you do, if you are sort of piecing it together with Dalton Schultz and Evan Ingram, maybe you go trade and solidify and go get yourself. I don't even. It'd be impossible to trade for Hawkinson.
It's hard to trade for tight ends. So
yeah, it's just hard because once someone. That's the thing with tight ends is there's so. I mean, I think maybe
7, 8 are like untouchable, so you're really not trading for anything different. But
I mean, maybe Ferguson. Maybe you could go get
Ferguson. Scares me too a little bit. So, but I don't know. Oh, are you frozen? John's definitely frozen. Oh, there you go.
Yeah, sorry.
You're frozen. So funny on my screen. It was great.
I'm trying to think of. I was just trying to think of someone who's like right on the cusp of being like an untouchable.
I mean,
Freiermuth would be a great one. I mean, after this week,
after
this week, good luck.
Yeah,
so, but yeah, that's a great name. That's a great name.
I got him for a bunch of 3rd-round picks this year. People were just giving him away. I'm like, give me the young tight end who's still good. Let's be real.
Right.
All right. So let's get into the waiver wire talk today. Jibs is gone for the day, so I forgot about that. So it's just you and me, John. We're doing the waivers here now. And of course, guys, we're doing just overalls. We're going through the quarterbacks, running backs, wide receivers, and tight ends. We'll give you guys players who might be available that you should probably pick up and guys who are definitely available. And then for your dynasty guys, we definitely have some potential pickups. Not a lot because it's dynasty, but potential pickups here. So I like to start with the 2 outside ones, and then we'll kind of dive into the middle here. The top guys who probably should be picked up, Russell Wilson's playing really solid. He's been decent quarterback. Jordan Love is someone I really like, especially I think he can help you get into the playoffs. Baker Mayfield's been a solid 20-point fantasy quarterback. Matthew Stafford is coming off his best game of this whole season. And if Geno Smith can get healthy, he's obviously, like I said, he's got some potential good matchups for your dynasty owners. Tim Boyle probably still out there. People really didn't believe in him. I still don't believe in him, but if you're in need of a quarterback this week, he might be out there. Joe Flacco might be the starting quarterback. PJ Walker might be out there. Trevor Siemian might maybe potentially have to get some work in. If Baker Mayfield's banged up, maybe Kyle Trask is out there in those dynasty world. So those are some dynasty quarterbacks. John, we'll split up the quarterbacks here. I'll let you take the top 3 and I'll take the bottom 3. So talk about Gardner Minshew, Derek Carr, and Kenny Pickett.
Yeah. So we talked about Derek Carr briefly. His matchups are great down the stretch. I think that, it's troubling that a bunch of his receivers are banged up right now, but given 2-3 weeks from now, when you're in your playoffs, everyone will hopefully be back and healthy. And Derek Carr has the weapons around him to put up big games. Rashid Shaheed can do it. Chris Olave can do it. We just saw. So I like Derek Carr. Gardner Minshew is a gamer. He, to me, is similar to like a Sam Howell. He just figures it out, man. Somehow, some way, he seems to, obviously not putting up fantasy points at that alarming of a rate, but he can tuck it and run it. He can throw it. He was targeting Josh Downs and Michael Pittman a ton. I think that the ground game is good enough that there is always a threat for the ground game, so that opens up things in the passing world. And then Kenny Pickett, I'm not as sold. I think he had an okay game with Matt Canada out of the way, but I don't know. I'd rather take my chances with a lot of other names than take my chance with Kenny Pickett. There's at least a shot that like a Geno Smith can have a big game. There's at least a shot that like Derek Carr could have a big game. I don't know if there's really a ceiling for Kenny Pickett. I think a good game for Kenny Pickett is 20 points. Like that's a great game from Kenny Pickett. So that's my only fear. And again, when you're thinking about championships and you're thinking about winning a title, you have to think to yourself, I got to put up the most points possible. I can't just get by. Like I can't just, tread water. I need to have a monster week. And I just don't see that in the cards for Kenny Pickett this year. Give him a whole off season with a new offensive coordinator and stuff, maybe, but not this year.
I respect it. So for the rest of these guys, Will Levis, Jake Browning, Bryce Young. Again, Will Levis has some decent matchups coming down the stretch here. That could be good for him. He still has to play. Let's see, where's his schedule at here right now? He's got Indy. We play the Titans. I didn't realize we played Miami. The Titans play Miami. He's got Seattle. So he's got some matchups that maybe will involve them to maybe throw the ball a little bit more, especially this week. If you're looking for a quarterback, that Colts game might be somewhat a good, decent outing for him overall. Could be okay if you're streaming a quarterback for this week. Jake Browning, he didn't do terrible, but like it was decent enough for what he was able to do against a tough defense. This week they play the Jaguars, so it could be a game where he could actually do kind of well for streaming quarterbacks. Bryce Young, it could be interesting. Maybe they switch a lot of things up there with him, allow him to just kind of let him do his work. The Bucs are a decent matchup, so it might be well worth it taking a shot on Bryce Young this week. Again, you probably don't want to. You probably want the guys between that 40 to 60% range over any guys really in that 40% range. So, but quarterback position is not the best this week, unfortunately. We don't really have ones that stand out for good streaming options.
Yeah, all the superstars are getting injured and hurt, and anyone who's good,
lots of backups.
It stinks. Anyone who's good isn't good. That's what sucks right now. If you don't have CJ Stroud, then forget it.
Yeah, basically. All right, for the RB waiver wire overview, that 60 to 40% range: Ty Chandler, Zeke Elliott, Zach Moss. For those dynasty owners, Patrick Taylor played about half the snaps with AJ Dillon this past week. We don't know if Aaron Jones is coming back. Rashad White's claimed that might have been an injury, but there wasn't. Keyshawn Vaughn might be needed to be picked up just in case. Again, really no dynasty players in terms of running backs. So let's go back and forth here, John. You can start us up here.
Roschon Johnson. I think that we need to start to see. We didn't have Deonta Foreman this week. I think we need to start to see what's going on with this rookie. They need to start getting him more and more involved. So, they obviously know that Deontay is not the future. He's probably out of the league next year. So I think Roschon Johnson could get worked in a little bit more. It's fresh, it'll still be a committee. And the problem is he could always be vultured from touchdowns with Justin Fields in the mix. So that's the downside with Roschon. But I don't think if there's still a trade window available, you can acquire him as a depth piece pretty cheap at this point. So I don't hate the name. He's a good break glass in case of emergency kind of guy.
Yeah. I mean, that's how a lot of these running backs are. They're not great, but so, a lot of these guys are like, you're desperate for a running back, basically. Jeff Wilson came off an 8-point game here. He's got Washington next week here. We don't know if Devon Achane's playing just yet. Might be good enough as a, desperate RB2 if you're looking for somebody, obviously, for your team. If you're killed at running backs or if you're on a bye week hell, might be okay of a matchup with him.
Royce Freeman. Royce Freeman keeps plugging away. They cut what's his name? Darrell Henderson, which was to me kind of a surprise. Because Darrell Henderson was the pass catcher and kind of primary guy while Kyren Williams was out. But Kyren Williams coming back, I guess, would fill that role more than he fills the Royce Freeman role. So Royce Freeman still got work. I think that'll probably fade away a little bit as Kyren gets healthier and healthier. But we saw him still get used in the goal line, saw him still get used in the red zone, had a touchdown. And then, God forbid anything happens to Kyren, he's the back on a good offense. So Royce Freeman is an interesting name to have. I wouldn't be in love if you have to start him, but again, this is where we're at. State of affairs with running backs.
Right, exactly. Samaje Perine coming off 2 back-to-back 10-point fantasy days. I mean, 2 weeks ago he had 7 receptions. This past week he had 55 yards. He happened to catch a touchdown because Williams got hurt. But again, he's another serviceable, RB3, RB4 that you could probably maybe plug in. They have the Texans this week. There could be a matchup where the Texans are ahead and the Broncos need to kind of come back from behind. P. Ryan can fit that pass catching role for PPR leagues.
Dearness Johnson, a name that has emerged as the back to ETN. It is no longer Tank Bigsby. Sad. Super sad. Super sad. This is my theory. You can only have one Tank superstar in the NFL, and sadly, it's Tank Dell. It's not Tank Bigsby. Tank. Sorry. So exactly. So Tank Bigsby, I'm sorry, but you are now the 3rd running back on this depth chart. So Dearness Johnson is at least a pickup for now, because if anything happens to ETN, he's going to be the next man up.
Yep. Michael Carter. Michael Carter got a ton of work at the end of the game for the Cardinals. They were kind of behind at that point, but they're obviously testing out the waters to see what kind of Michael Carter has in his game. James Conner hasn't really looked too good since coming off of his injury. He's decent, but Michael Carter played pretty okay for the limited snaps that he was able to give us on the field here. Again, probably deeper man leagues, but he's out there. He might be worth a pickup in maybe 16-man leagues, but who won his name on the list here?
Rico Dowdle. This name was really interesting to me 2-3 weeks ago. But then all of a sudden, Tony Pollard decides to start scoring touchdowns again and looking like a normal running back. So I think Rico Dowdle is purely a handcuff again. But a few weeks ago, he was getting mixed in. He was getting work. He definitely was splitting time with Tony Pollard, getting double-digit touches. But I think that now this is Tony Pollard looking right. Sort of puts a wet blanket on Rico.
Right. Yeah. Kenny Gainwell, kind of similar to Rico. I mean, he's just a handcuff running back that has really good matchups. We talked to you about DeAndre Swift having a fantastic matchup. It might be a good idea to kind of just have Kenny Gainwell on your bench and see what happens. Maybe, hopefully nothing happens to Swift, but if that happens, Kenny Gainwell gets into a big potential opportunity Even Rashard Penny. I think Rashard Penny would actually take a big chunk of work, obviously, if something happens to Swift. But Gainwell's there for sure. So yeah.
And then Elijah Mitchell, back up to CMC. He is one. It's, you always kind of say like, oh, well, if so-and-so goes down, it's this next guy up. And I always think to myself, well, it's tough because you don't always know exactly what's going to happen. This is a situation where we know if CMC goes down, it's Elijah Mitchell 100%, and he'll get 100% of the carries. He'll get all the work. So he is a true handcuff to CMC. And again, on one of the best run offenses in the league. So he should be stashed if you have CMC for sure. He is one that could be you might get 70% of what you get from CMC, but that's still really good. 70% of CMC is still great. So I'm cool with Elijah Mitchell being on benches at this point in the season. This is where you have to start stashing guys like this. You no longer need Tank Bigsby's. You don't need these, what ifs. You need, hey, if X, I get Y.
Exactly.
Holding on to guys who could develop doesn't matter anymore.
Nope, not at all. Tajay Spears, another handcuff kind of. He's kind of fallen out of favor of any potential real production. But again, like we said, Tennessee has some decent matchups against Houston down the stretch here. Something happens to Derrick Henry. Tajay Spears kind of fits that mold, hopefully, as a starting tight end, running back. All right. Wide receivers here. Again, there could be more in this 60 and 40% range here that might have fallen in here. But guys like Jaden Reed, Noah Brown, Rashad Rashid, Odell Beckham should all probably be picked up this week. All look like they're having good roles in their offenses. For Dynasty, Greg Dolch is probably still out there in a lot of Dynasty leagues. Not sure how long his tenure will last with the top three receivers, but he's there right now. Khalif Raymond, Lynn Bowden, Keith Kirkwood, as in terms of the Saints in that situation, they might be looking for some wide receiver help this week here, and those guys would be next men up outside of one guy we'll talk about here in a second here. So let's see here. Let's see how many are there. There's what I have 3. Let's go 2 by 2 real quick.
Okay. Demario Douglas. Love him. I think he is a sneaky add and trade low for in Dynasty. I hate him rest of season. I don't want anything to do with him. I think it's just a terrible situation to be a Patriots wide receiver right now. But he is the number one target. It is established. It is clear at this point. So, and he's a rookie. So I think next year could be a lot brighter when they have Drake May under center. Curtis Samuel. Curtis Samuel is another one who he can have splashy type plays, but I get worried when you're the 4th target on the Washington Commanders. How reliable are you going to be? And what I can't pick and choose. It's not best ball, so I need to really know when I can start you, and I don't know if there's ever going to be a time when you can start Curtis Samuel.
Like it. Some players that are on bye this week that you can sneakily pick up after waivers hit, or not 2, but 1 player. A.T. Perry, he might be into a bigger role than he already is. Again, didn't really do too well this past week with any real production, but if Alabi's going to be out, Rashard Rashid's going to be out, Perry might find himself in a 6 or 7 target potential day. Khalid Shakir, again, kind of a down game in a really epic matchup, but he will have games like this rest of the season where it's kind of up and down as long as Dawson Knox does not come back into the game or on the field this season. He's got good matchups. He's on a bye this week, but Kansas City, Dallas, the Chargers, all big game matchups where it only takes Rashad Rashid, Khalil Shakir, just 1 game to kind of go off for 80 yards and a touchdown. So could be a ticket winner for those 14, 16-man leagues in those notes.
Yep. And Jalen Hyatt, rookie for the Giants. People probably don't know his name very well because he hasn't done anything this season of note, but he just passed 100 yards receiving this past week. He's headed into his bye, so that's kind of tough. But if he's out on waivers, he's someone that I don't know how much I'm willing to hang on to him through a bye. But speculative ad. Be very curious. I think there's a nebulous situation in the passing work for
great matchups down the stretch.
Great matchups down the stretch. Exactly. Great matchups down the stretch, and no real alpha to speak of, no real number one. And Jalen Hyatt is similar to these Rashid Shaheed, Khalil Shakir, these speedy, big play kind of guys. That's who Jalen Hyatt is. And as long as Tommy DeVito keeps slinging it like he's got no job to lose, then I'd be interested. The problem is he's going into his bye next week, and I don't love hanging on to guys like that through their bye. Elijah Moore. Elijah Moore is the number 2 target for the Browns. I think that, we don't know what's happening with Amari Cooper and this rib injury. We don't know what's happening with the quarterback situation. I believe that Joe Flacco can be serviceable. I believe Joe Flacco can sustain a decent offense. And
Flacco did well with Elijah Moore when they were in New York together.
Absolutely. That was absolutely. So I think that, Elijah Moore could be one of those guys that, sneaky, you don't know, there's always these names. I remember winning a championship with Brashad Perryman one year. It's like there's guys who just come out of the woodwork and just have big games. They might have, all you need is to string together 2 or 3 big games. And, if Amari Cooper's out of the way, Joe Flacco's back at center, Elijah Moore could be one of those guys.
Yeah, definitely. Joshua Palmer is still on IR. He's got one more game before he could potentially come back. Again, the Chargers still haven't found themselves a strong number 2 yet. They desperately need somebody. Joshua Palmer was looking good before their bye. More of contending teams looking to kind of for a guy to place on their IR or bench. If you need to kind of wait for a little bit, he might be able to provide some value down the stretch. Jonathan Mingo for deeper man leagues or for 12-man leagues where let's see what happens with this new Panthers look offense. Maybe he starts getting going. He had 60 yards this past week here. He is a young wide receiver still. Interesting to see what he does coming up down the stretch.
Cedric Tillman, rookie from Tennessee. I liked Cedric Tillman in the draft process. I thought he was a pretty complete wide receiver. Had some big plays in college, but that's not really his profile. But again, if Joe Flacco's back there and we have Amari Cooper sort of banged up rest of the season, I don't know his motivation to really, fight through and do all that if the team is all over the place. Cedric Tillman looked okay this past week. He's going to see some targets and so and good matchups. So I like Cedric Tillman as a speculative ad for sure. Jameson Williams, I mean, we're going to talk about him until he retires. I guarantee it. He will always be, a big play potential threat guy. He's finally seeing more snaps. It didn't come to fruition this week, really. But he's seeing consistent enough snaps where I'm interested again. When you're out there for 13, 14 snaps, I can't play with that. But if you're out there for, 40% of the snaps, 50% of the snaps, like, okay, now we can start to have some motion. So I'm cool with Jameson Williams. I don't know really if it'll ever hit the heights that we all expect it to, but he's a good ad.
Yeah. Devontae Parker, when Devontae Parker's on the field for the Patriots, he does pretty well. And if Demario Douglas misses this game this past week here, it needs to be someone to throw the ball to. So Devontae Parker could be a streaming wide receiver ad this week if you're looking for someone. And, I still continue to bang on the door for Quentin Johnston. I'm really hoping he can figure it out at some point. I don't know if he was benched or the injury benching. I don't know if it was actually a benching or it was an injury concern bench. But again, I don't even want to name him. I don't know why he's even on the list at this point. But he's on the list because he's attached to a high-power offense. So... all right, and then finally, tight ends here. Tight ends, some guys, probably the guys you want to pick up is obviously Pat Freiermuth. He definitely wants to be a big pickup. Darren Waller's under that percentage mark. You might be able to sneak him on your team. We talked about him earlier. Isaiah Likely, he fit the bill. 4 for 40 this past week. Good enough, but he's going on a bye. So definitely good enough for me. Some dynasty leagues. Luke Farrell got a lot of playing time in for the Jags this past week here. Tanner Hudson continues to be kind of out there on dynasty waivers. Will Mallory, if you want to take a deep dark shot on Colts tight end, he's kind of popped up over the last few weeks from time to time with some plays, but nothing crazy here. If you want to run through the top two, John, and then we'll get going.
Sure. Juwan Johnson, they're going to need pass catchers. If everyone's banged up this next week, they're going to need somebody. I think it's probably going to be a heavy dose of Alvin Kamara and Taysom Hill. But Juwan Johnson is good for the week. And then, we'll see what happens come playoff time. And Tucker Kraft, I'm okay. I think there's just a lot better options out there at this. Any other name on this list, I think I'm more interested in. Tucker Kraft's fine, solid, but 3 catches doesn't do much for you.
Yeah, I respect it. Tyler Conklin is kind of just out there, maybe a servable tight end too. Nothing to be flashy about. I have Tanner Hudson on here twice, but that's how I feel about him in redraft leagues. Gerald Everett coming off a decent game, 440 and a touchdown. I mean, I feel like every play time I was watching that game last night, he was getting the ball in his hand, but he only had 4 catches. So, but again, he's a decent streaming tight end. Kate Otten's playing much better as of late. Definitely another streaming tight end for fantasy. So, again, waivers are not that great right now. That's kind of why we waited to the end of the show to do that. But there's some
Pat Fryermuth is the name on this whole list that I would be actively trying to add, trade 100%. For, get. That's the name, because people forget it's been a while. It's been a really crappy year for Pat Fryermuth, but he was solid. He was so solid last year. He was playing out of his mind, and he walks in as a healthy player and gets 12 targets. Like, that doesn't exist in tight end land. That just doesn't. Any tight end that gets double-digit targets, you're like, okay, that's amazing, because every other tight end gets 4 targets.
Exactly. So that is going to wrap us our show up tonight, guys. We talked about some news. We talked about playoff schedules, and we obviously went through the waiver wires. John, anything you want to mention before we get going?
No, pray for me. I need Cole. Speaking of tight ends, I need Cole Kmet to get 21.5 PPR points to win a pretty pivotal matchup in one of my leagues. So I will be glued to the TV watching that. But no, this is great. Thank you everyone for tuning in. Thank you everybody for listening. Subscribe to the YouTube. See our lovely faces every Monday and Thursday, 5:30.
Yes, absolutely. And again, we appreciate you all for tuning in. Like John just said here, we'll be back on Thursday talking starts and sits for week 13. Anything else? Not really. Just continue to follow us over on YouTube, Twitter, wherever, and hit us up with your fantasy questions here. The playoffs are coming up before you know it. We got to get you guys ready to help you guys win some championships. So that's all we're here to do, is help you guys win, because we want you guys to make big money. So thank you all for listening. Tune in until next time, guys, and have a good one.